What's up? Thank you for checking out the Hospitality Strategy Lab. My name is Jason Littrell, and I'm here with Matt Wallaert, who's a behavioral science expert and author of Start at the End. Matt, thank you so much for joining us.
Jason, thanks for having me. I'm really excited to talk about this topic.
Well, I appreciate you making the time. So tell me about the book.
I sort of got cajoled into writing this book a few years ago. I didn't really intend to do it, but then people sort of were saying, hey, we want to better understand how do we do applied behavioral science. So for folks that don't know, applied here is as opposed to academic, right? This is not about studies from a lab. This is about how you actually do things in the world to change people's behavior. The point of everything is behavior, right? So applied behavioral. And then, we use science as a methodology for doing that. Not science in the on an ivory tower sort of version, but science as the practical applied design process, which is experimentation, which every business owner knows how to do. You learned it in 8th grade. Like, hey, how do I have a theory about the world, test out that theory, and then learn from it so that I can do it again and again and again so my business gets better.
How would you say behavioral science applies to hospitality? Let's say an independent operator.
I mean, I think hospitality is one of the most clearly behavioral of industries, right? Because, you only make money in a fairly direct behavioral way, whether it's buying that next beer or booking that next room, right? It is a very behavioral business. And so it's very amenable to experimentation around behavioral things. So I'll give you a very easy example. So psychology tells us about the peak end rule. So when people look back on their experience somewhere, when they're going to leave you a review at your hotel, what influences that is the peak or valley, right? So the worst or best thing, and then whatever happened at the end, right? And so a lot of hospitality owners optimize for those peaks and valleys. Hey, how do I make sure somebody has a really shining, great moment? They go to the bar and the bartender knows their name and it's this great experience for them. But they often forget the end. A very simple thing that folks can do in the hospitality industry is just make sure that you are giving people a really positive end experience. Don't give me a cookie at the beginning when I check in. Give me a cookie when I check out. One of the best examples that I could think of recently from my own travels was, I was taking a really early flight the next morning. And so I used sort of virtual checkout and things. And when I woke up in the morning, there was a little bag on my hotel door with an apple and a bottle of water and a little note that said, have a safe flight. What a great end experience, right? Cost them, 75 cents to do it, but absolutely left me with a positive impression, as opposed to every other hotel where I just sort of walk out the front door with nothing.
So so you call it the peak end rule. I'm familiar with a couple basic principles of behavioral economics, where it's you're talking about. It sounds like primacy and recency. Like the first and last impressions are the most meaningful.
Yeah, it's not actually. It turns out that the first impression doesn't tend to actually to function in people's long-term recollections of something, which is what you care about when they're leaving a review, right? Because most people don't leave a review just as they leave your establishment. They leave it when they get home, which means there's been enough time for some of it to gloss over. So it turns out the beginning doesn't matter nearly as much as we might think it would, right? It's that end experience and then whatever the best or worst moment was, right? If there was a really terrible experience, it usually gets mentioned in a review. But if you had a really great experience, that also colors sort of the time that they spent there. We talk about primacy. Certainly it's true that first experiences matter, particularly in things like long-term relationships, et cetera, right? Because they set the tone for how we interpret something going forward. But it turns out when we look at things that are discrete moments, right? Discrete periods of time, generally it's the end that actually matters more than the beginning for us. And this is a little counterintuitive for a lot of hospitality owners who often concentrate on that first moment. And I'm not saying don't. I think that's a great time to be concentrating, but make sure that you're also doing something at the end that gives them that memorable out the door experience.
Yeah, there's a lot of little tokens that people have used throughout history, like just leaving a little piece of candy with the bill. What are some other examples of high impact, low cost, low effort things that people can do to really change the exit experience?
Yeah, it's interesting. So as I said, I liked I experienced the door bag, which I loved on the way out the door. A lot of folks have gone to virtual checkout, which I think makes sense. And I understand why from an efficiency standpoint, we do that, but finding ways to, hey, when someone hits that, slip a card under their door that says, hey, I hope you really appreciated your stay. attach a piece of candy. Make sure that somebody is, at the door saying, thank you for staying with us, right? It's not just about greeting people into your hotel, but giving them a warm send off as they go. Sending follow-up emails, right? So, couple hours later, hitting them with that, hey, I hope you really enjoyed your stay with us, and we really look forward to seeing you again, right? So my last experience is a really positive, note. We do a ton of stuff leading up. I travel a ton. I keynote a lot of things, so I have a lot of chances to experience hospitality. I get a lot of stuff up front. Hey, I'm Jason. I'm the manager at the hotel. We're really looking forward to you staying with us. What we don't typically get is something afterwards, right? Once I've completed the experience, the hotel seems to kind of forget about me. That's actually the moment to send me something. Jason, I hope you had a really good time at my hotel. If you have any feedback, I'd love to hear it, and we'd love to see you again. Drinks on me next time. Here's a coupon code for a free drink next time you come in. Mm-hmm. That kind of like end experience stuff can be very cheap and easy, and it just often doesn't get done.
How do you apply behavioral science principles to generate a positive experience towards the end without sounding robotic or sterile or cold?
Yeah. I mean, I think we leaped right into one solution, right? The peak end rule. But let's step back into a process. So the process, I always sort of give people, the acronym I give people is SIDE, right? Because science is on your side. Strategy, insights, design, evaluation. Strategy is just, hey, what behaviors do you actually want from people? Now, this sounds kind of silly, but a lot of businesses don't sit down and say, hey, actually, what do I actually want people to do, right? What behaviors matter, right? They're like, give me money. Yes, I hear that. But what behaviors actually matter, and where are those keystones that you want to make sure that, like, hey, I am really clear when Jason visits my hotel, I want him to have a drink at the bar, right? I've decided that as a business focus, that's a behavior that I want. You then can say, all right, well, why is that happening or not happening? That's all insights is. So when we think about human behavior, we think about competing pressures, promoting pressures, reasons to do something, and inhibiting pressures, reasons not to do something. So if Jason isn't going to the bar, it's one of two reasons. One, there's not strong enough promoting pressures. There's no reason for him to do that, right? Or two, there are strong inhibiting pressures. He might want to go to the bar, but he can't for a lot of reasons, right? He can't find it. It's too expensive. All of those are inhibiting pressures. So if I can figure out why Jason is or isn't doing something, then I can do something about it. And that's all design is. Design just says, well, hey, I can change Jason's behavior by strengthening those promoting pressures and weakening those inhibiting pressures. And then that E is just experimentation. Hey, I need to actually try it, right? So I need to actually find out if it works. Don't just do something because you think it will work. Do something because you can prove it will work and give it a try. So we could take an easy example. I like this going. I'm trying to get Jason to have a drink with me. So I'm going to keep going with this Jason has a drink example. All right. I want when guests come to my hotel and they want to have a drink, they'll do it at my hotel bar. That's a good, strong behavioral statement, right? If I'm successful, this will be true, right? My drinking patrons will drink with me. What are the inhibiting and promoting pressures for drinking? Jason, why might you go to a hotel bar? What's a good promoting pressure?
Why wouldn't I go?
Well, no, why might you go? We're going to do promoting pressures first, right?
For me, it's it would have some sort of a convenience would be a big one for me. I'm lazy.
There you go. So convenience is interesting, right? Because convenience is the removal of an inhibiting pressure. If this bar was fluorescent lit, all the drinks were bottled beer, you probably wouldn't go, no matter how convenient it was.
Right? Unless it were in like Mexico, in which case I would totally be there.
Then you'd be like, yeah, but exactly. If that were part of the experience, right? But even Jason, you just said it. If that was part of the experience, if the terribleness of it was the point, I might do it, right? Because I want to be able to tell a story. Having something memorable that I could tell a story about is a very strong promoting pressure. It's a reason people do a lot of things. People do a lot of dumb things so that they can tell stories about them later. That's a strong promoting pressure. Well, what can I do to make my bar story-worthy, right? How can I help somebody have an experience that causes them to be able to tell a story about it? And so you can start to think about like, hey, these are these promoting and inhibiting pressure. So you're right. Convenience, inhibiting pressure. Cost. All right, I can make my drinks as low price as I can, right? we think about promoting pressures, we often think about these ambiance things, right? Like, okay, I can make it look nice and I can make sure, but a lot of people go to bars to meet people. So making sure that my bar has a lot of people in it matters, right? Can
Hmm.
I work with local organizations, singles clubs, mixers, dating apps, whatever it is? Can I invite, the Thursday, meetup group to make it at my bar so that there's enough people in there because people want to go to where people are, right?
So
And so
sorry, go ahead.
really thinking strategically about these promoting and inhibiting pressures. Why are people, not just are people doing it, but why are people doing it? And then recognizing that you can change those, right? You don't have to sort of fait accompli what happens. You can actually change those pressures to then change behavior.
Okay, so what you're talking about is a lot of guest facing psychology. How would you talk about how would you characterize how you'd approach a staff of bartenders, servers, managers? How would you help them communicate what the storytelling element is?
Yeah, absolutely. So Jason, this is one of the lovely things about science is that it is a process that works everywhere. The reason that humans for the last couple thousand years have relied on science is because it is a generalized process. And so the same tricks that you're using the same process that you're using to create behavior in your guests, you can also use to create in your staff. So Jason, I work at Oceans, right? So people are coming to work with us and then in Sri Lanka, and then we're helping them work with American startups, right? Or American small businesses. And one of the primary reasons that people come to us is growth, right? They've sort of hit their cap in Sri Lanka. They've gone as far as they can go. They want to continue to feel like they're growing. This happens a ton in hospitality, right? When you lose someone, it's often because they feel like they've stopped growing, right? They no longer have the promoting pressure that is growth. Okay, so I have a behavioral statement. When people want to have a job that is meaningful to them, they will work at my establishment, right? When everything's working correctly, that's what I want to be true. Well, there are inhibiting pressures to that, right? Shift scheduling and timing, and it's hard, and I don't like my manager, and all these things. And there are promoting pressures, reasons to do it. And the most powerful promoting pressure, more so than money, right? People will take a lower paying job that allows them to demonstrate growth. Now, a lot of times, I think business owners think growth means title growth, right? I go from assistant server to main server to assistant manager to manager. But the problem is that's really capped, right? You can only have so many managers. You can only have so many assistant managers. And so you can't provide people with a growth pathway. You got to think about growth more broadly. So I'll give you a really easy example of something we do at Oceans. Everyone at Oceans has a set of what we call role competencies and Oceans values. So role competencies are things they are able to do. It's not what they do in their job, it's things they're able to do. So even if I'm a server, if I can demonstrate that I can make a complex drink, I get credit for that, right? And we as a business are saying, oh, yes, you went from a 1 to 2 on mixology, right? Because I can demonstrate I can make this drink. And anybody can demonstrate that, even if it's not part of their daily job. I didn't have to change their title, but they still were able to grow, right? They
Hmm.
were able to demonstrate something new, learn something new, etc. Right? On the value side, those aren't demonstrated competencies. Those are parts of how we work. So one of our values, for example, is no one dives alone, right? All of our employees are called divers.
Dives, dives.
Dives, yeah.
Oceans works with divers, by the
We
way,
work with divers. They're not
not
actually
life and
literally
death.
physically
Yeah,
divers. We just call them. No one dies alone is
right.
that's a little trickier. Dives alone, that's us. No one dives alone. And everybody in the company gets between a 0 if you're going to get fired, but a 1, 2, or 3 on that. And then there it's very clear, hey, a 1 means this, right? A 2 means this, a 3 means this. And so everybody has the opportunity to be showing all of the time growth and improvement across these things. Even if they're not becoming the assistant manager, right? They can see, oh man, I went from a 1 to a 2 on analytics, right? Or I went from a 2 to a 3 on, no one dives alone. And so they're always feeling that growth and they always know where to go next. Okay, I have a 1 over here. That's a place I can lean in. I'm already at a 3. There's not much more I could do here, but there's a 1 here and that's a place I can get stronger. It doesn't have to be title growth or salary growth. It has to help make sure that people are feeling like they personally are learning new things and then having the opportunity to demonstrate those things. And so, it can feel like, oh man, that's a really highfalutin corporate thing, but you could do that in a bar. Absolutely.
I
right?
was going to ask, how do you implement that? How does that get measured? Like, how do you do that in a way that's like not overly burdensome?
Yeah. So the first thing we do is have everybody set a growth goal. So when you join, we say, hey, Jason, what does growth look like for you? Right? Because, let's say you're you're a busboy. I'm going to take the so far as I can get down on this ladder. There's a really different pathway to, hey, I want to go be a chef, and hey, I want to go be a bartender. Those are really different things. And so making sure that you're understanding, hey, what growth pathway is a person on? And it can be as simple as asking and writing it down. And so that every time we meet, I know, Jason, hey, you're on this chef path. Let's talk about what I can do to help you move along this chef path. Hey, after your shift, do you want to shadow Chef Matt for a little bit? Right? Hey, we have an opportunity for a line cook. Is that something you'd want to think about? Right? So you can always be having this conversation based on the person's choice about their pathway. So it's not sage on the stage. It's not me imposing on them what growth looks like. It's guide on the side. Jason says growth looks like this for me, and I'm always looking for opportunities for him to then demonstrate that growth. Again, not in title or salary, but in learning.
Hmm. That's fascinating. I wish somebody had asked me that at every job that I worked at, but not a single person did.
And you know what, Jason? Across many, many studies, it is the number one predictor of how long people stay at a business, right? More so than salary, more so than anything else, is personal growth. If they feel like they're continuing to learn new things and demonstrate those in the workplace, they will stay, and they will stay with high levels of satisfaction.
Yeah. Is this going to get me where I want to be?
That's right.
Is this job going to get me closer to where I really want to be?
Right. And not necessarily where I want to be in the like businessy sense of the word, but rather who I want to be. Is this going to make me better? Right? Humans have a very intrinsic drive to become better, right? And that gets systematically beat out of them by systems that don't seem to care. Jason, I don't care what you want to do to grow. I need a server, you're a server, be a server, keep doing the thing that is a server. Well, yeah, that person's not going to stay very long, right? You're not demonstrating any care for them as a human, right? You're not honoring their very deep core need to grow. But if you could say, hey, Jason, you are a server today, but I understand that your goal one day is to be a really amazing chef. And while you're here being a server, I'm going to surround you with as many experiences as I can to help you get that place. Now, it requires effort on your part. So I'm going to give you an opportunity that might go outside your shift. Hey, do you want to shadow Chef Matt? You can't do it during your shift, but afterwards, if you want to stick around, you're welcome to learn a little bit about this thing. Imagine if someone had asked you that early in your career and how long you would have stayed at that job if somebody was continually saying, cool, and the next thing is this, and the next thing is this, and the next thing is this, and I'm going to help you learn these things. Hey, do you want to shadow me as a manager? Come on your off day. You want to shadow me as a manager? See what I deal with on a daily basis? We can look at how do I do shift scheduling? Like there's a million skills, even in the small microcosm that is a bar, there are a million business skills that are happening, right? That you could go to a community college or go get an MBA and try and learn in a formal way, or you could learn at work from someone who cares about you.
Which is arguably more valuable. Real life experiences, I value that much more than book smarts for sure. All right, so there's a kind of a new psychology emerging with Gen X and Gen Alpha, or Gen Z and Gen Alpha, where it's like, I'm not doing that. You're trying to exploit me. Like,
Yeah,
have you ever gotten any of that kind of stuff? You have any
absolutely.
thoughts on that?
Yeah, there's been kind of a progression. So about 10 years ago, I gave a TED talk about the movement from money to meaning as a motivation at work. And the point that I made was if you look at college students in their senior year, they will tell you the most important thing about a job is the salary. But as little as 1 year into the workplace, they will tell you the most important thing is meaning, right? That I am doing something that is meaningful, that changes things for other people. Humans are very meaning oriented, right? And so this reports in all sorts of interesting behaviors. So the talk that I gave was based on some data that happened, sort of post crash, right, in the late 2000s, right? When the job market was really terrible, you saw this interesting perverse behavior, which is Jason graduates from college and refuses to take a job. Refuses to take a job. And the reason that he was refusing to take a job is he had been educated in college to say, well, the reason I go to college is to get money. right? That was the way we attracted people into college. Go to college, you get a better paying job. And so your expectation, Jason, is that you're going to come out of college and make 80 grand a year. And so if you take a job for 60 grand a year, you feel a 20 grand loss. That's what it feels like to you. Even though 60 is better than zero, you don't want to, as long as you stay at zero, I'm not realizing the loss, right? I'll wait for that 80 grand job. I'll wait for that better opportunity, right? And so that's why meaning is so much better as a motivator. The problem with meaning, and the reason that we're seeing what you are talking about today, this sort of rejection, is that companies have a really hard time delivering on it. So I actually think it is incredibly important. So sitting down with your employees, and I'm going to stick with the bar analogy, and sort of saying, hey, this is why bars are important, right? Most Americans, for example, would agree that we have a huge loneliness problem, that we have a huge socialization problem, that we no longer gather as a society. So sitting down with your employees and saying, hey, I know you think of this as just a place that makes money. I want to be clear why we do this, right? Bars are an important public gathering space. They've been that way for literally thousands of years. The reason they've existed, the publican tavern has existed as a concept for thousands of years because it brings people together, and we need that more than ever. And so we are all going to work collectively here. Yes, we're going to pay the bills. Yes, we're going to make enough money, but we're going to make this a space for people. That's an important talk to have. But I don't think it stands up without the growth piece, right? Because when you have it without the growth piece, and here's what's in it for you, and here's how you're going to get better, then you have the reaction you just talked about, Jason, which is, you're just telling me about this thing so that you can make more money, right? You have to have that growth leg of the stool, or it falls over. You need that third leg because that's the what's in it for me, right? And that balances out the, hey, we're going to make money in these ways, and you're going to get a portion of that money. We're going to create meaning in these ways, and here's how you contribute to that meaning. And we're going to make sure you have meaningful growth, and here's how I contribute to your meaning or to your growth, right? That growth is the part where you get to give back as an owner, right? That balances out that equation, because over here, they're making money for you. You both are aligned around meaning, and then you're going to return to them personal growth.
How does one establish what their values are in a meaningful enough way that they can communicate that with everybody who walks in the door?
Yeah, I mean, I think that the first thing you have to do is make sure that you know them for yourselves. You cannot communicate values that you yourself do not believe in. One of the mistakes that I think people make about values is they don't pick values that are controversial. What do I mean by that? It's not a value if no one could disagree, right? Values only exist in areas of disagreement where people can say, yes or no to something, and a reasonable person could disagree. I'm going to take a stupid example at work these days, which is virtual, sort of work from home versus work in the office. Both of those I can make an argument for why people should be in the office together. I could also make an argument for the flexibility of being at home. As a reasonable person, I could argue either side of that thing. A value is then saying, but we have decided as a company that the value that we're going to hold is this one, right? It's a choice that you make. So if you have a value, hey, we should be respectful to all our customers. Well, that's a shitty value. Everybody would say, yeah, no shit, man. We all can agree that you should be respectful to your customers. That is a reasonable thing that every reasonable person would agree with, right?
Unless it's part of the concept. I mean, I grew up in San Diego. You're in San Diego, right?
Yep.
I grew up in San Diego where there's a dirty, I forget what it's called, Dick's Last Resort in the gas lamp quarter. Like their model was just being rude to people, and it was kind of funny, and it was part of it. But that's
but you remember that because it was a principled value.
Yeah,
right?
You're going to go there and get insulted, and it was part of the gag. Yeah,
right. But it was a thing which a reasonable person could disagree with, right? So values stand up when they're things that somebody could disagree with, right? I'll give you a different value. We live at a time and a space where not everybody agrees that every bar should be a safe space for LGBTQIA plus folks, right? That is a value because it's something that some people might disagree with, right? Now we could debate the reasonableness of the people who disagree with it, but it is something that you could disagree with. And the ability to disagree is what creates a value. And so you got to take some real time and sit down as a leadership and an ownership team of every hospitality establishment and say, what are our beliefs? that other people could reasonably disagree with, but we have chosen to draw the line here, right, at this establishment, because
That
that's
sounds
what
like
we believe.
it sounds. So, I mean, this is what you're for and what you're against, right? We're against factory farmed food, right? We're for LGBTQIA plus.
And look, factory farm food is a really great example. I, as a reasonable person, could say, hey, look, we live on a planet. The most sustainable thing for the planet is for us to produce as much food with as little energy as possible. I can make an argument for why, sort of better living through chemistry and production is actually a better idea. And you could say, no, I think it compromises the integrity of the food and blah, blah, blah. Like, we could have a reasonable and principled disagreement about that. That's a great value. Hey, here we believe this. Right.
And by stating that and having everybody aligned and marching to the same beat on that, it attracts better staff that are also aligned with that. People understand why they're probably paying a little bit more, and it attracts like this kind of smaller tribe. What are your thoughts on building a community, and like using like kind of like how would you approach a process to building a community around your bar, your restaurant?
Well, I think there's two kinds of community. One is the community of your staff, right? You talked earlier about retention, and so it's important to make those people feel bonded around those values. And then a community, that's external. And the best way you can do that is be transparent about your values. So after you go through that exercise of saying, hey, here are the principled disagreements or agreements that we are having with the world at large. Here are the places where we, are not just repeating something everybody says, but saying what is unique to us, what we believe. Then you need to be transparent about that. Right? Put it on a sign on the wall. Be clear on your Facebook page, right? Like, talk about it in conversation. Values aren't values if you don't talk about them, if you don't communicate them clearly to other people. I think a lot of times people shy. Sometimes, I'm from Oregon, right? Rural Oregon. And, a lot of people there immigrated from the Midwest, right? We got a lot of Scandinavians, and they don't like to talk about things like that in a public way. The reason, because it feels like bragging, right? And they don't like the feeling of bragging. Here's the thing I'll tell you. It's not bragging to be clear about your beliefs and values, right? What it does is create an opportunity for people to choose you, right? And that's really important as a hospitality brand. You want people to make an active, affirmative choice to use you because that's what creates loyalty, right? When people make a choice to be part of your community, then they're likely to stay in that community. If you're just the default, you're the bar down the road, right? Then it's very transient. If another bar opens a block closer, great, you lose all your clientele, right? If somebody figures out a cheaper, better happy hour than yours, there goes your clientele. And so that's a race to the bottom. But if you say, hey, here are the things we believe in, then you can build a moat around that. And to your point, Jason, you could charge a little more. You could charge a premium, right? You could be at a higher price point or a little less convenient or have some other stronger inhibiting pressures because you've got that strong promoting pressure that is, hey, these people are aligned with me. So it's not share your values for bragging. It's share your values so that people can choose you or not choose you. If you are not an establishment that people could say no to, then you're not an establishment that people can say yes to.
It seems like just having that one little piece dialed in would impact a lot of things upstream and downstream, like your marketing, for instance, your staffing, your recruiting, your training. All right. Last question before I gotta let you go. What's if you owned a bar or restaurant, like what would your strategy be to get the best team and live past the first year?
Oh man. I am a non-drinker. And so I think that there is a huge opportunity in creating bar-like spaces for people who are not particularly interested in drinking. I don't think that's the same as I wouldn't serve alcohol, right? But I think you can really double down on creating a space that is interesting and useful because the reality is all of us could go to a liquor store and get booze, right? Like, it is much cheaper to access the booze directly. If you are going to a bar, right, you're going for a hell of a lot more than the liquid content of the alcohol that's in the glass. And so I think if I was, going to open something and this was a passion of mine, I'm very interested in the experience that you create around everything that isn't the drink, right? There was a interesting thought, and I'm not saying I have the answer to this, by the way, small business owners. If I knew, maybe I'd open one. But there was an interesting provocation that was given to me once, which was, could you make a bar successful that only sold water? The only drink available is water. Can you still make it someplace people want to come? Right?
100%. It would have to be in the middle of the desert probably, but
Maybe not though, right? I mean, think about Cheers. They didn't come for the booze, right? They came for community, a bartender they knew, other people, right? If you go to any bar in America that has a regular clientele, those people are not coming for the drinks, right? I can get, Coors Light anywhere I go, right? They're coming for something else. So trying thought experiments like, wow, could we make this place successful serving just water? What would we have to do? What would that look like? Is a really powerful provocation for all of these alternative promoting pressures that aren't the drink itself.
That's a really interesting thought exercise. That's a really interesting thought exercise.
Future podcast episode. You get some experts in here and debate. All right, how would you make a bar that sold only water?
Well, it's funny you mentioned that because like I intentionally, this is a podcast about hospitality, but I intentionally don't bring bar and restaurant owners on here because like what got us here is not going to get us there. And
For
so
sure.
like this is why I try to talk to like outside experts that like understand the psychology and the strategy and the tactics of running a successful bar. But we're just not thinking about this kind of stuff. And that's why we're having a hard time, anytime that there's any kind of political change, any kind of local government compliance change, like we get crushed. Okay, well, so is there anything you'd leave us with, or do you want me to?
Oh man, you're putting the peak end theory on me here.
Yeah, 100%. No, I can't screw this up. This is my last chance.
No, I mean, I think I'm going to double down on something I said earlier, which is I believe that hospitality, and whether that's bars or sort of any of the broader diaspora of hospitality, serves an incredibly important function in human society. And one of the reasons that it has been persistent as a type of business, right, for so long is because it is so important. And so I think it's really, bars are hard to run. There's a ton that goes wrong and it will just grind you down. And I think staying really focused on the important and meaningful aspect that it serves in the world. I'm not saying you have to want to run a bar forever and there are reasons to retire and reasons to sell and reasons to things. But I hope everybody walks away understanding that you serve a critical function and that you steward that responsibility, right? It's not only important that we have bars, it's important that we have bars that allow people to come together in safe, kind, productively disagreeing ways, right? A really good bar allows Jason and Matt to have a productive disagreement, but still want to share the space and come back the next day.
Really powerful stuff. Okay, my biggest takeaway is that it's worth the investment to take the time to sit down and really think and dig in on your beliefs and your values, and because that informs how you communicate with your team, that informs recruiting, informs your marketing strategy. All right, thank you so much. We got TED speaker, author, Start at the End, wherever you buy your books, and expert in behavior science. Thank you so much, Matt Wallaert, for being on the Hospitality Strategy Lab. If you haven't tried my accelerator, head to jlittrell.com. It's free for 14 days. And thank you so much for being on the show. I look forward to following up with you. Thanks, Matt.
Thanks, bud.
And that's it.